Hi, I'm Jerry with Dr. J's Restoration RX in Lebanon, Oregon. And on behalf of the filling stations, Chevrolet and GMC Quality Reproduction Parts, I'm happy to bring you this video on restoring the vent windows of a 1967-72 Chevrolet or GMC truck. This procedure would be similar to other makes and models, so after viewing this video, you should be able to adapt these procedures to your own project. There are some specialty tools and rivets needed for this procedure. You probably already have some of the common tools you will need. If you don't, they are not expensive to purchase. The tubular rivet flaring tool and the tubular rivets that I will be using in this video are available from the filling station. The first thing we have to do is disassemble the vent assembly. So let's get started. One of the first things we have to do is get this all apart, and to do that we have to take and drill out this rivet. There's a little rivet on the pivot area of the vent window right in here, and it's a tubular rivet. So to get those out, generally what we do is we just drill those out, or you can use a little Dremel grinder and get these shaved off here down to the flat, and then use a punch, something like this, just to get up in there and pop it out of there. Once you've got that out, the next step is to get this assembly disconnected. And to do that, there's a little retainer washer here on top of the nut, and then you've got this spring and some other washers down inside here. In order for you to get all this apart, you have to spread the tangs of this little washer to get it loose. It's a locking type washer. You got to get it loose from the nut. Then the nut can spin off, the spring will drop out, and then once this is loose here, you can tilt the assembly out and get the whole thing apart. One thing you have to remember is that there are several washers in this one. There are actually 4, and 2 of them are specialized washers that have kind of an oval cut in them, and I'll show those to you after a while. You've got to remember the order that these things go in so that you can get it back together that way. If you're only doing one vent window at a time, that helps because you have something to refer to. But I'll go ahead and get this rivet drilled out right now, this one in here. Get that popped out. We'll pop these off, and once you get all this apart, we'll get the vent window out of there. We can pull the rubber out, but before we do that, there are a couple rivets up in this area, up in the top area, that we have to disconnect, at least on this particular model. Now I'm going to go ahead and drill out this tubular rivet so that we can get it disconnected. You want to do it carefully so you don't get into the base metal. You just want to get that rivet disconnected enough or drilled down enough to where it will pop out. There we go. Now I can see the base metal, so this thing should pop right out of there. And there she goes. Now we've got this disconnected. I wanted to show you what this rivet looks like. It's a tubular rivet, and as you can see, it's got a shoulder on it. And that shoulder is there because there are 2 different size holes when we're dealing with this vent window pivot rivet, or vent window pivot area. The upper hole has a larger diameter, and the lower tab has a smaller diameter hole in it. So that's the reason for this shouldered rivet. We'll be putting this in when we do the final assembly. Now I'm going to do the disassembly of this stem area here where the spring and the nut is. So the first thing I need to do is to take a screwdriver and bend these tabs right here back so that I can get a socket on that nut. Try not to bend them any further than you need to, because these can break and it's not exactly an easy locking washer to get. Okay, now, as you can see, this one's really rusty, and what I want to do before I attempt to break this loose is put a little penetrant on it. I'm going to go ahead and spray it just a little bit. And basically, when something's this rusted, what you want to do is just kind of work it back and forth. It may be something that you have to heat, but the last thing you want to do is break the stem of this thing. Then you got problems. You got to weld it back together and then, you know, rethread everything or chase the threads and all that, which I'll probably do anyway. But anyway, if it feels like it's going to turn, then you're okay. But generally, when something's this rusty, it doesn't want to turn. Just see if you can break it loose. This one doesn't feel like it wants to come loose. So what I'm going to do on this particular one is I'm going to heat this nut and see if I can get it warm enough to expand it a little bit, break down some of the rust, and then see if I can pull it off with the socket again. Okay. You want to make sure you don't get your spring too hot, because that will destroy your spring. Just want to get that nut warm enough, some of the shaft, so we can see if we can break this thing loose. Once it moves, generally it'll come off. Okay. And we've got that heated up. We'll let that sit for a minute. And we'll go ahead and try to break that loose one more time. Okay, now we'll get the socket back on there and see if we can get her loosened up. And sure enough, it's moving for me, so that's a good sign. Still, you have to be careful. You don't want to force it too much. I kind of work it back and forth, get that rust broke loose a little bit. Each time it comes a little bit easier, and pretty soon it will come off. And there we have it. Got the nut off. There's that little washer. It's kind of a funny looking thing, but it works for what it's intended to do. Pull the spring off. And what I like to do is put these things in the order that they came off. Here's a little washer. It's kind of a masonite type washer. It's got that oval hole in it. like I was mentioning earlier. So that goes here. There's another washer here. Looks like another fiber type washer. And it's just got a round hole in it. That one is just a round hole type washer. That one goes right up against this stem here. Now we can actually get this disconnected. To do that, these washers have to slide out too, because they're captured inside this area here, this little bracket. So we've got to just kind of work those out. Sometimes you can tap them. Things like to get stuck in there because they are rusty. And if you just kind of work it carefully, back and forth, it will come out. And there we have it. There's our vent window. And the next one in line is another round fiber type washer. And the last one is a steel washer that has a flat on it. I don't know if you can see that well enough, but that one has a little flat on it, and that's what keeps the vent window from opening too far. It kind of creates a stop down in this area on this bracket. So there we have those two pieces disconnected, and the next thing we got to do is get into this area. We've got to scrape out this felt first of all, and I'll show you how we do that. And once we get this felt out of there, the old felt, it's going to expose a couple of rivets down in this area, right up in here, that we need to disconnect to get this frame apart. In this particular model, we have to get this frame apart up at the top here in order to get the rubber off of it, because the rubber actually wraps around the frame here. And the only way to get that rubber off properly and get the new one on is to disconnect these rivets that are right in here. So we'll do that next. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to scrape the old felt liner out of this channel so we can go ahead and get to these rivets up here on top. When the factory puts this together originally, what they do is they've got these stainless steel beads right here that go along the channel, and the felt is put up under those beads, and this bead is actually crimped over the felt lining itself. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to put a new channel in here which has the backing and everything, not just the lining. So all I need to do right now is to cut right along this bead on the inside and cut this liner loose like this, so that we can scrape this liner out of there. Try to get right along the side of the bead here. And we're just going to cut that all the way down. Just staying right along the side of the bead. And we'll cut right down to the metal so that we get all that liner out of there. Okay. Now we can just take and pop that liner out of there. We'll get the bulk of it out first. And then what I'll end up doing is coming in with a wire brush and cleaning all this up really well so that we can paint it. Got most of the old stuff out now. And what that does is it exposes the two little rivets right up in here. And those rivets are right on the back side here. There's one here and there's one up under this rubber right here. So if we peel this rubber back, you can see the other one. There's actually two rivets side by side, right there. So we're going to drill those out, and that will disconnect this frame from the post and allow us to get this rubber off of here and eventually put the new rubber on. Okay, now I'm going to drill these rivets out so that we can disconnect the post. There's one. We're just drilling out the flared part of the rivet, so we can pop them out of there. I disconnected that one. And I think I got a little bit more drilling I got to do on this one. And of course that rivet wants to spin on me. I'll try popping it out, but if I don't get it, I'm going to have to come in with the Dremel. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so we got her disconnected. And that's basically on a 69 to 72 Chevy pickup. That's pretty much all you've got to get apart right here. And like I say, the reason for that is because this rubber at the top has to actually go around this top post. So you can't just pull it out. Now that we've got that apart, we can pull out the rubber in here. It should pop right out for you. There's the old rubber. Throw it aside. The next thing we've got to get apart, in kind of the same way, is we've got to get this vent post seal out of here because we're going to replace it as well. It's got tubular rivets also. So what I'll end up doing is I'll drill those out just a little bit. See if we can pop those out of there and get this post rivet off of there. Once we get it off of there, then we're pretty much ready to start cleaning this thing up and getting it ready for paint. I'll end up going in and sandblasting all these parts, make sure they're good and clean, along with all the springs and stuff, springs and washers. And then we can prime and paint all this. This one was black, there's no chrome on this one, so all we have to do is paint it black again. So I'm going to drill out these rivets in the post seal here. Having this frame apart at this point makes it really easy to get to this one because it's kind of a tight squeeze in there. So it's a good thing that you have to pull these out. Now I'm going to just drill these. I believe this is a 9/64 drill bit. I want basically to drill the hole the same size that the original hole was. I don't want to drill this out any bigger, so the new ones will go in nice and tight. You just drill them in until you feel that thing pop through. Like that. Once you get in there a little ways, they'll either pop through or you're going to pop them through, one of the two. There we go. And there is our post rubber right there. The old, out with the old and in with the new. Pop that last rivet out of there. Out it goes. And we're ready for some cleanup on this guy. I'll run a wire brush down in here to clean up all this channel, the old felt in here. I'll tape this off in here, like this stainless piece. I'll tape that off. I'll polish these beads on the buffer on both sides, at least up in the area that it shows. And then I'll tape these beads off so that we don't get those sandblasted at all when we get them into the booth. And once everything's totally taped off here, this and these beads, we'll get it sandblasted and we'll paint her up. And we're going to do the same with this vent window here. The glass is okay on here, so I don't have to replace the glass. So what I'll end up doing is I'll tape all this stuff off, the glass and everything, right up to the metal part. And then I'll sandblast this, all this metal area, and we'll paint this all black, get it all nice and shiny again. And we'll be ready for reassembly after that. Okay, I'm just going to wire brush this just to get the heavy stuff out, because this is all going to get blasted anyway. Get it really clean before we paint. And the next thing I need to do is go over to the buffer and get some buffing done on these stainless beads, bring them up nice and bright. I'll probably buff this little cover plate here. And then we start taping everything off that you don't want to get sandblasted or painted. Let's get some buffing done here. Quite a bit of difference between the two beads right now. Just a little bit of buffing really makes a big difference in the shine. Now I've got those two buffed. I'm going to put a little buff just on this little stainless steel striker here, and then we'll tape everything off. The reason I buff now and not later is because this is all going to be painted, and you don't want to have to be buffing up against some newly painted surfaces. So that's why we do that. Nice and shiny again. Yeah, that looks much better. Beads look good. Now we'll do some taping and we will get things sandblasted and painted. This is kind of the tedious part, taping these beads. And generally I'm just going to tape down to about this area because the rest of this is inside the door, will never be seen. So what I'm going to do is just take a little piece of tape right here, get her started. This is just to protect the stainless bead from sandblasting and paint. Throw it around in there. And generally I like to put a couple of coats of tape on this because the sandblaster can be pretty aggressive, and it's a good idea not to take the chance and sandblasting your stainless. So get that in there, wrap it around the bead. In the side. Try to get it really well stuck down because you don't want this coming out in the middle of your sandblasting procedure, if at all possible. And what you can do here is just take your knife and go right along that bead, cut it off. There, pull it up, and then you can use this for your second coat or on your other bead. And that is one bead all taped off, ready for blast. Now we'll do the other side. And now we've got this guy ready for the sandblaster. Got the little striker plate taped off, both beads, 2 layers of tape. We just got to make sure that that's going to stick. Hopefully it will. Watch it the whole time I'm blasting it. If you don't want to sandblast it or you don't have a sandblaster, you can always just scuff this up like a scuff pad, hit it with wax and grease remover, and then paint it. You can do that with all of this if you want. It's just a lot easier to sandblast this stuff. Now I'm going to go ahead and tape off the vent window, and off camera I went ahead and hit this with the glass and the chrome and all that with some wax and grease remover, so I have a better chance of this tape sticking really well. First I'll do the handle. Okay, we have the frames all painted up now, and we're going to start assembling the rubber onto the vent window frame. First thing I wanted to mention to you was the channel that's on the back of the rubber is a grooved type channel, and it matches the frame. There's a channel on the frame, so one goes into the other. Anyway, what we'll do is we'll end up putting this on the frame first, up at the top. And then the procedure from there on in is to just start tucking it into the frame. So you get it started, and you can just use a screwdriver to tuck it in. Get it started on one side. Sometimes they'll pop in for you, but most of the time you have to tuck them in because it's a fairly tight fit. But you just kind of follow it down. Get the bottom here in first. Once you get the bottom piece into that channel, then you can just take the top, take a screwdriver and just tuck her right in. Just work yourself all the way down. Keep tucking it in all the way down. Now, when you get down into this corner, it's a little bit difficult to get this channel because it's such a heavy piece of rubber right here. It's difficult to get this channel tucked down into the corner. So what I like to do is take a small vice grip. I'll get this tucked in first. And we're going to put the vice grip right here and just kind of pull it on in. And that should get it in there. Actually, it almost looks like this is going to go in. Yep, it did go in. The last vent window I did, which was the other side of this one, there was no way I was getting it in by hand, but this one seems to have tucked right in there. So I cut a break on this one. Okay. We'll check to make sure everything's tucked in there properly. And it looks like we've got her in. So that's the first thing you want to do. You want to get the main rubber in here. Then next we're going to rivet the vent post seal in, which is this little seal right here. And it will go in here. Now there's a little pocket in the rubber, and the reason I put the main rubber in first is because I want to be able to put this into its pocket here, like that. So pocket right in the rubber, molded right into the rubber. Then we're going to need to push that down, get that rivet through, and then crimp that rivet. And that's the next thing we'll do. Okay, now we're ready to put the vent post in. I've got the rivets here, which are a specific size rivet, and these are available at the filling station. They're a tubular rivet, and they're just like what the factory used. Let's see if I can get you a look at them here. That's the rivet. It's a tubular rivet, semi-tubular. And it's got a nice flat head on it. You can kind of see the low profile of the head there. And the tube. Anyway, that's the rivet that we use. There's a specific size that fits these holes, and will give you enough length here to flare it over and make it look like a factory rivet. Now I've got a rivet tool I use to do this. Makes it a little bit easier and makes it, you know, a little bit more factory looking. It's hard to tell after this tool has been used if it was factory put in or not. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and install these in the vent post. To do that, I come in from the back side. Put the rivet in the hole. Hopefully it'll stay there. So it's got to go through the hole in the metal and then through the vent post seal. So we need to line them both up. So I've got that in now. Flip it over. Once I can see the tubular rivet through there, I'll get my tool in there, get it on top of the rivet, and then we just flare it over with this tool. A couple of pops on that usually gets us where we need to be. But it makes a nice factory looking flare right there. So now that we've got that one in, we can continue on down with the next ones. There are 4 in this piece, and the last piece goes into another pocket up here on top. But we'll have to work that in after we get this in, because it's just a little bit difficult. You've got to keep the top of this frame out of your way, or I can't get the tool in there, and especially if you're using just the hand flaring tool, you need to be able to access it here to get that in. So we'll get the other three in here, and then we'll put this into the rubber pocket last before we rivet these two up on top here. This tool, by the way, is probably not a tool you're going to want to buy unless you're going to do a lot of vent window rubbers, because it's about a $300 and some odd tool. And the only reason I did it is because I had planned on doing these long ago. But boy, it sure works nice. The other way to do it, of course, is with just a little hand punch flare, which you can buy at the filling station as well. Okay, I'll flare this down. Couple pops on that. And we've got this vent post in place with all nice factory looking rivets. Okay, now I'm going to try to get these rivets into this post up here. And once I get that in place, I'm just going to use myself as a vise here, pull down on this, because this thing wants to be up higher. The part with the rubber on it wants to be up higher, so I've got to kind of pull it down and then get that rivet in place. Once I get those two to mesh, we're in good shape, which it is. Now, I'll get my tool once again, get that rivet in there, and we'll crimp her down. Get a good crimp on it. That's got that one in. Kind of show you that one. That's that one. Nice flare. And then there's one more just down below this. So we'll get that one in place next. Okay, we got those in. The frames are back together now. Next step is we'll get the vent window glass in here, rivet that down, and we'll be set to go. Okay, so now to reassemble the wing window assembly into the frame. The first thing I need to do is get this post down through the rubber, and as soon as I get it into this area right here where the little bracket is, I've got to get two of these washers on, and I'm going to put them on in this order here. Now these two washers will go inside the bracket. The round one and the one with the little oval cutout in it will go next on the outside, then the spring, then the locking tab, and then the nut. And everything will get tightened up. Once it's tight to where the wing window has got some tension on it, not too much, but enough tension to where the wind just won't blow it around, then we'll go ahead and lock down these tabs on the lock nut, and that's pretty much it. The last thing that we have to do is put this rivet in here. I've got to get that rivet in and then flared down. Once that's attached, then this assembly is complete. So this is what we're going to do right now. this has got to go in here. Okay, I've got it through. Now I've got to get this one on. And I believe it has to be facing forward. The flat, I mean, needs to be facing forward so that it doesn't let the wing window open too far. Then we're going to put a round washer on, and then it goes through the bracket. From there, we put another round washer on. We put this little washer with the oval cut out in it on after that. Push it on in. The spring goes on. A little locking washer, and then the nut. And I'll just put that nut on just temporarily right now. This tab here needs to go below this tab, and that's where that rivet's going to go. So now we'll take and tighten this up. Till we get enough tension on this wing window. And it's a little too loose. So we'll keep tightening. One more turn here. And we'll get these, once we know where we want to stop tightening this spring, which I think is going to be right about there. Then I'll get the flats of the nut lined up with the flats of this washer, and we'll just tap those down. But I'll do that very last to make sure that we're in the right place. That way I can adjust it if I need to once I get everything together. So now we can close this down. And the next thing that we need to do is to get this little rivet, this shouldered rivet, in place. So I will go and get that, put this assembly in a vise so that I can get the rivet tool and flare that rivet down. Once that's done, we'll make sure that this is tightened properly, everything's closing right, and we'll lock these tabs down. Pretty much ready to install. Okay, now you can see I've got the pivot areas lined up here. I'm going to go ahead and put this shouldered rivet into the top part of this. Now that that's in place, I'll flip this assembly upside down and put this on an anvil of some sort. And then I'll use this tool right here, which is the flaring tool for the rivet, right up underneath here. That'll flare it out, give it a nice round flare. And it'll also tighten it down. Once I get that done, I'll come back to the nut down on where the spring is on the bottom and tighten that up. Right there. Tighten this nut up here, put these tabs down. If it's tight enough, I'll leave it alone and just fold the tabs down, and we're pretty much done. Okay, I've got my lovely assistant wife helping me hold this vent assembly, because you really need two hands to put this rivet down and get it flared nicely. So what I'm going to do is I've got the rivet head is on the vise, and I'm just going to bring this tool and just flare this down to where it's nice and set. Starting to flare. There. That made a nice flare. It looks like it's nice and tight. So I think we are good to go on that one. Okay, the last thing is to make sure that your tension right here in this area is all at the right tension. so that, like I said before, the wind doesn't blow the window open or closed or whatever. And it feels like it's pretty darn good right where it's at. So I'm going to go ahead and just tap these down, set those in. And if you break one of these tabs on this little locking washer, it's fine as long as you have one tab still. If not, you'll have to either try to make something or find another locking tab type washer. So anyway, we've got everything in, the rivets in here. This is all tightened down to the proper tension here. I put the little wings down on the nut so it won't come apart. Last thing is I'll just check and make sure that we're getting a good seal. I'll lock this down. Everything looks like it's nice and tight. No gaps in the rubber or anything. This assembly is ready to be installed. As you can see, vent window restoration is a little involved, but not beyond most do-it-yourself restorers. If you follow my video and take your time, you will find that this part of your restoration can be fun and very rewarding. If you don't have the time or the tools to do this job, just send the assemblies to me and I will get them done for you. Check my website, www.drjsrestorationrx.com, for more information and pricing. I hope this video will encourage you to take on this project. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to my channel to see more upcoming restoration videos from Dr. J's Restoration RX.